This edition of Mac Voices TV is brought to you by Smile, the makers of Text Expander, Text Expander Touch, PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, and Disclabel. Find out more and download demo versions at smilesoftware.com. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is Mac Notables on Mac Voices TV. We are the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner, and joining me to talk about her newest Take Control book is Tonya Engst of Tidbits and Take Control. Tonya, it's great to have you.
Well, Chuck, it's lovely to be here. It's great to be here partly because the book is done. It's wrapped. We are probably going to release it, I guess, tomorrow. I'm not sure when people listening to this, by the time they're listening to this, it probably will be yesterday or something. But the point is that I put in some really long hours on this book. It was a considerably more time-intensive update than I was expecting. And today has been really fun because I haven't, sort of had this monkey sitting on my shoulder saying, work, finish your book.
Now, of course, we are talking about Take Control of your iPad, the newest edition. But before we get to that, Tonya, I think it's time for a little Engst family counseling, marriage counseling here.
Yes.
Adam was on with us with the Diablo Mac Valley user group and basically said that you wouldn't let him touch it. Now, the story he gave us is that your excuse was that you were writing this book. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, couldn't you let him play with it just a little?
Well, if he'd been really nice.
Okay, Adam, sorry. I tried.
I have this organizer by my desk. It's meant to hold, kind of 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper kind of stacked up so the paper's horizontal. But I don't use it for paper when I'm writing the book. I have 3 iPads, and I keep sliding them in and out of the slots in this thing.
3 iPads, I assume, what, first generation, second gen, third gen?
That's right.
Okay.
And my desk is pretty small, so they don't, it ends up being quite a jumble if I don't put them in the slots.
So this is a truly well-researched, well-experimented book if you have all 3 iPads sitting there to test out everything.
Well, it was actually very challenging in some ways because the third generation iPad has some features that are unique to it. Like it has the super fancy high resolution Retina display screen. And so that's something that only it has. But then there are other features that it shares with the second generation iPad, but not the original iPad. Features like the camera. So in updating the book, just to be confident that I was doing a good job, I really had to go through the whole thing, if not mentally imagining which iPad I was using, then really literally with the iPad, does it work the way, does it work, is this, just because there's so many features in these things, and the book is a little long for a Take Control book, so It was quite a project, and it was very interesting to me to see the differences between the different models. I mean, they're all great, really. If you still have an original iPad, I think you still have a great machine, but they keep advancing.
Tonya, some of that's a little bit surprising. I believe we think of the iPad as very powerful but very simple, and that the upgrades have essentially been pretty easy to understand, like you said, for the third generation. Better screen, better camera, faster processor, and that's very, very oversimplifying it from what you're saying. There's a lot more you need to know and understand about what this machine can do versus maybe what the prior generations can do.
Right, and I think a lot of it is the more subtle, geeky details. So, someone who just wants the broad overview, better camera, better screen, but then you start getting into these very, very fine details. Like, for instance, the first generation iPad doesn't have a camera. So when you're in its Photos app, it doesn't have a camera roll album. That wouldn't really make sense normally because there's no camera. So it has, what's it called? Saved photos, I think it's what it's called. It has a different kind of default album where photos end up. And so that's just a very small, tiny, picky little detail that's different. But when you write your section of the book where you talk about how to, open up a photo or how to sync photos over or what happens when you take a photo, you have to always keep that in mind or you'll get it wrong.
Now, I congratulate you. I would not have even thought about that. Just the fact that I'm showing a bit of bias. I've upgraded with each model. So, you
Sure,
just
you have.
say, yeah, thanks. So you tend to, okay, this is the way it works. And you forget that the prior model may not have had a capability and therefore it didn't work the same. So you really have not necessarily just updated this book for the new iPad, the third generation. You just updated across the board, so anyone that has maybe received a hand-me-down iPad would benefit from the book.
Right. And the good news is that the differences are not so large that the whole book ends up being just jumbled up with, kind of if you have the iPad 3, then do this. But if you have the second generation iPad, then do this other thing. It's not a whole lot of, jumbled up different directions for the different iPads. Fortunate. If that had been the case, I might have chosen to not include the original iPad because you don't want your whole book to be awkward to read. But I do see definitely people reading this book who have a hand-me-down iPad. It's their first iPad ever. They're thrilled with it. There's nothing wrong with an older iPad. It works great. So I want them included. And I also very much see this book being for people who support their whole family or who their colleagues often ask them questions. So they need to, be helping, Uncle Joe, who has an original iPad, and their 8-year-old daughter, who has the iPad too, and their mom just got a new iPad. And so in their minds, they need to be able to conceptualize the differences between the different iPads so that they can, provide on-the-fly tech support. And definitely, I think a lot of the people who read this book will be people who, maybe they own a third generation iPad, but that doesn't mean they can just forget everything they knew about the old ones.
So, Tanya, what do you think? What do you find the most compelling reason to buy an iPad? And well, maybe I should say to get an iPad, because we know people out there, they're going to be buying used first gens, being handed down second gens, or outright purchasing third gens. So I'm going to kind of take us back to iPad basics. And what I mean by that is, what does the iPad bring to the table you think is the most compelling now that we've had it for a couple years?
So there's so many compelling reasons to buy an iPad. It would be very difficult to pick the most compelling one. And that's partly because it's different for different people. So with the third generation iPad, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was on a podcast with you, Chuck, and I said I thought the Retina display wasn't going to be a big deal. And when I first got my third generation iPad, in fact, I noodled at the home screen and I looked really carefully at the icons on the home screen. I thought, no big deal. Then, a day or so later, I get into the iBooks app and I start reading an ebook. Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. So if you're looking at an ebook reader, you really must look at the iPad in the context of making your decision, because the screen on that third generation iPad is just completely hot. It's just so clear and crisp. And everybody who's come to my house since I've noticed this, I make them sit down on the couch and I give them an older iPad and a third generation iPad. And I say to them, can you see the difference? Can you see the difference? And they can all see the difference and they all like it.
Tanya, that was kind of one of my surprises too, that the screen I thought looked great. I don't think I really appreciated it, first of all, until I started doing some reading on it. But a funny thing happened. About a week later, I went to a meeting, a company meeting, and actually for the very first time, they were doing presentations via iPad. They handed iPads out to the crowd as opposed to paper handouts, but they were iPad 2s. And boy, did I notice the difference. It really, really surprised me at how used to I'd gotten to the new Retina screen and how clear it was, and how all of a sudden, not fuzzy, that's not really fair, but just how much less sharp and distinct everything was. So it really is something that may not strike you right out of the box, but I think that once you start to get used to it, it's tough to go back.
It's pretty nice, and I've heard just a rumor that maybe someday Apple will come out with laptops that have one of these Retina displays, and I just thought, I'm there. I already said to Adam, I said when Apple comes out one of those laptops, we're not waiting around. I'm getting one of those right away.
Yeah.
So it is a pretty compelling feature. Um, the iPad is a many faceted thing. So another reason why some people get it is just because they want a lightweight kind of device that they can take around to meetings and take notes on and look at PDFs on and kind of use in the place of a big notebook. And I think that's a extremely legitimate use for it. I myself have tried to use the iPad for that purpose, but ultimately broke down and bought an 11-inch MacBook Air for that purpose. And I think that's partly because the fact that I am an extremely experienced Mac user with a lot of slightly customized tools or special processes that I use in my work. And it was just being too frustrating and taking too much time to move all that over to the iPad. But I have found, especially at meetings, that the smaller the device you're typing on, the less obtrusive it is. Especially at the kind of meetings that I go to where I'm often the only person with an electronic device. But I found that the iPad actually ended up being more distracting than a small laptop because everybody, is like, whoa, you've got an iPad, whoa. So it didn't work out as well for me, but I know, there's probably, half the people listening to this podcast right now are thinking, no, I use my iPad all the time for work stuff and it's great. So I know that there's sort of different factions on that count. I really like my iPad as a music player. It's very fun. It's kind of replaced the boombox concept, on the desk. I don't like running iTunes on my Mac because it always starts grabbing processor power or turning the fans on really loud, or it just kind of makes my Mac unhappy. So I really like having my music offloaded onto another device. What other reasons to buy an iPad? Well, you can buy an iPad to watch Netflix. It works great for that. And my family, we were for a long time, our best television set was an iPad. And my husband and my son and I, we'd sort of curl up on the couch around this iPad to watch. We would watch Netflix, actually, and we were very proud of ourselves because it's a little hard on the older iPads to hear sometimes on Netflix. The volume isn't that good. It's okay, but it was just a little hard. And so we figured out that we could use the AirPlay technology to route the sound from Netflix over to an Airport Express, which was connected to a stereo system. So our sound was great. Our screen was very little. So anyway, for Christmas, we bought a new Apple TV and a very large television. So now sometimes, just for fun, we watch something on the iPad screen and then mirror it over to the TV, and that's just very fun. Although our TV has apps in it, so when we want to watch Netflix, we can either use the Apple TV or we can use the built-in Netflix over on the TV. So it's very fun. So I may have lost track of the original question at this point.
Tonya, there's so many things in there I want to touch on that you said. The idea that you're the only person that is in the meeting with the iPad, that's going to change quick, because there was a time I think we all walked around with our iPhones and people would stop you and say, "Oh, is that an iPhone?" And now, you can't go anywhere without the whole place being iPhones. So that part's going to change. But I'm interested to see if you are one of those people who is feeling some kind of strange pressure to make your iPad your main production machine.
No, not at all.
Okay, good. Because
it would just be so ridiculously impossible.
Well, not just that, Tonya, but it fascinates me that people, at least at this moment, I want to make my iPad, my main thing. And I don't think it was designed for that yet. I think there will be a time that it could be a very viable 99.9 or 100% replacement device, but I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think we should be.
Well, I mean, it just depends on what you're doing. I mean, have a huge monitor and I get, 7 windows open at once and I need to read my email while I look at 2 web browsers, while I look at a PDF and who knows what else I might need to look at. And if it's not all up there at the same time, I would just spend my whole day opening and closing windows. It would be just completely ridiculous. I'd have to take up farming or something as a different job because I'm insane. So no, it's not even close. But that's because of what I do. So I mean, if what you do is check your email twice a day, I don't see why the iPad couldn't work quite nicely for you. But it's just not happening.
Yeah, and I think it's a fallacy to try to push it that direction. Certainly, you find your favorite apps for editing photos on your Mac and on your iPad. You find your favorite email client on your Mac, on your iPad. And if that sounds redundant, it's really not, because I do agree with you 100%. There are places that you can take your iPad, you're more comfortable taking your iPad than you would be a laptop. And there are places it's just not practical for a laptop, even if you don't mind being the only one in the room with an electronic device that's opened up in front of you. So I think it kind of cuts both ways, but it just shouldn't be that pressure.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, people have to do what they're going to do. And I think the thing about the iPad that it really excels at, and where, again, it slightly falls down for me because, I am running a publishing company while for some reason I just decided to write a book, while, I'm a mom and I volunteer in the community and I try to get out on my bike. And so I don't spend that much time playing on my iPad. I spend some time playing on my iPad, but the iPad is for playing in many ways. And by playing, I sort of include enjoying media. But there's all kinds of fun things that you can do on the iPad. I mean, give a bunch of teenagers Photo Booth, which is, an app on the iPad from Apple where you can just kind of do crazy things with photos, and there's tons and tons of third-party apps where you can take that further. I mean, you can just have so much fun on this thing. It's not all about productivity. And that's also, I think, a piece where people sort of lose the point. It's not just about taking notes and speaking dictation and how quickly you can do your email. So it is kind of getting back to what I said earlier. It's just so multifaceted. I think each person will find their own ways where it fills a niche in their lives and just does something better than anything else. I mean, this is going to sound a little nuts, but the iPads in my house, because we have, at the moment, I think we have 5 iPads. I may have slightly lost track. But one of the original iPads long ago got stuck into this thing called the fridge mount, which is basically a really heavy-duty magnet kind of frame for the iPad, and you stick it on your refrigerator. And we use it on the fridge for, recipes a little bit, and we do play music from it on the fridge. But the big use is checking the weather. I mean, we check the weather on this thing 3 or 4 times a day. I'm not kidding. And a lot of it is because Adam in particular, my husband, he will often go for longer runs where he's coordinating with friends, and I will often go for rather long bike rides. And so where the bands of rain is, or if it's going to snow, or if it's actually going to get up above 40 degrees by noon, these are very relevant questions. And although you can check the weather on the iPhone, the screen's too small. It's much harder to really see what the radar is doing. And you can check the weather on your computer, but there's just something so awesome about using your fingers to pinch and pull the map and move the map around, where the iPad is just way better. So it would be ridiculous to buy an iPad so that you could check the weather, but we really like using it for that.
I think that's the magic of the iPad. It becomes kind of what you want it to be or need it to be. And like you said, you check the weather for some good reasons. Checking the weather might seem trivial to some folks, but you have very specific reasons and needs. And the same thing,
That's true.
I think
That's
that
true.
with the stock app, or with your email, or your Twitter feed, or your Facebook feed, or whatever social network feeds, this machine does it. If there's a downside to it, and it's one that I think will be addressed eventually, is what you said earlier about needing to have 2 web pages up and your email and this and that. It's a version of multitasking. Of some way, maybe not a
Right.
multi-threaded thing where I have an image rendering in the background while I'm over answering email, but the ability to get more than 2 things on screen. On the other hand, you do have a limited screen real estate, and so maybe that's not such a hot idea to have more than just 1 or 2 or 2, maybe 3 things on screen at a time.
Right. And it seems like what Apple is saying is that the desktop computer, the Mac OS or, Windows OSs like that on larger desktop traditional computers, have sort of evolved in a certain way to meet certain needs and to address the concerns of certain types of users. And I think with the iPad, Apple really, threw all that out the window and just kind of said, let's do something new. Let's address the needs of a different set of users as our kind of core thing that we're doing here. And it's not like you can't still use your Macintosh. I certainly hope anyone who feels pressure to switch to the iPad but likes their Mac will just say, no, I like my Mac, and that'll be the end of it. I do have some girlfriends who have come to me in the last year or so because they need a new computer of some sort, and they're not sure whether to get the iPad or maybe some kind of laptop. And I've seen them go in different directions. Some of them just really identified more with wanting the continuity with the Mac operating system and more of the desktop features. And some of them actually felt that it was very important for them to maintain their technical skills in the sense of being familiar with iOS, since it's very clear that the conventions in iOS, they're becoming part of our spoken language, and the little icons and gadgets and things are showing up in desktop software. And so they felt that it would meet their needs well enough for what they wanted to do, and then the desire to stay up to date with this, really exciting thing that's going on, push them over the edge to the iPad. But in those cases, they're choosing their only home computer. I think, one of them doesn't have a computer at work because she doesn't work, and the other one does have a job with a computer at her desk at work. So, but they were making a choice for a home computer.
It really is an interesting world. The word is convergence, and yet I'm not sure it's really fair. But I was at Photoshop World in Washington a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, I guess now, by the time folks see this, and was in the Wacom booth looking at some of their new tablets with basically your drawing or whatever on the display itself, which is very reminiscent of an iPad now, a lot more sophisticated from an artistic standpoint, a lot of pressure sensitivity and all. But you're seeing that crossover. And you're seeing, of course, the magic trackpad with our desktops, and we've had trackpads on our laptops for a long time. So touch is becoming more and more a part of it, and yet it's just, once again, we're in an evolution. It seems like we're always in an evolution, but right now it seems like it never stops. We just as soon as we get really comfortable with something else comes along, not because it's the latest, coolest new thing, but because it really works for what we are trying to do and the direction we're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. I think the whole evolution thing is very challenging. It's challenging for someone who writes about technology in a different way than it's challenging for people who don't write about it. But one of the things that I've started to talk about amongst fellow authors and editors, and it's trickling into the books just a little bit, not too much yet, but that because we're really reaching a point where the interface that a user might be working with might change very dynamically. We might release a book in August. The interface might change in a subtle way in September. It might change again later in September. It might change again in October. It's sort of hard to know what it might do, but it's clear that if you're writing a book-length document, especially if if you have to discover these changes by noticing them yourself, you're not, receiving a change list. That it's sort of going to become impossible to write an accurate book length document. Sort of a fool's errand. It is not humanly possible. But worse yet, for readers, let's say they get the book in August and they read it and they're like, okay, the button, has like a funny round thing on it and it's over in the left-hand corner, right? And then in September, the button gets a blue funny round thing on it and it moves to the top of the screen. So they have to notice that this has happened or they won't be able to do anything. And it's getting to the point where the skills that you need to know to discover how to use an interface are becoming really important, because it's not going to be possible to get accurate written directions because nobody will be able to write them. So the skill of just saying, oh, I've kind of done something like this before, or oh, the search field isn't in the upper right hand corner, look, it's in the lower right hand corner, okay, no problem, are going to be really important. And case in point, in the iOS 5.1, which is the operating system that just came out for the iPad, Apple made some changes in the music app. And one of the changes they made is they basically put back the ability to make playlists right on the iPad. And I can't even remember what version of the operating system it was in last time. I think it was iOS. It was either iOS 3. I think it was iOS 3, but honestly, I can't remember. But the point is, it's almost identical to what was there before. It's a little different in a few small ways, but it's basically the same. So if you can say, oh, right, I've seen this before, or, I think to delete something, you have to slide your finger across it to the right, and then you'll get a delete button, or, so the ability to sort of conceptualize this stuff instead of needing specific steps is just becoming really, really important for normal users. And it's also becoming really important for technology people to try to explain it a little bit more generally, even vaguely, not because we want to be vague, but because we want the person to pick up a skill instead of memorizing steps.
Interesting distinction. And you do point out, it's really strange. There a lot of the tech companies, and Apple was among them at one time, took a lot of heat for not updating things quick enough, that the competitors change things, the tech changes, and why aren't they taking advantage of it? Now we're seeing just the opposite. The tech is changing as fast as ever, if not faster, but all the tech companies and the software authors and developers are getting a little more fleet of foot. They're implementing the changes that are available to them. They're taking, with social networking, they're taking user feedback and integrating it into their apps faster, which makes it difficult for the documentation and the instructional stuff out there to keep up, especially even with ebooks. I mean, I don't know that print books are completely dead, but if they got to be pretty close for technology, and even with you publishing ebooks, it still represents a huge challenge.
Well, sometimes even on the tidbit side of things, we feel like the articles are too. At some point, I was researching. I think it was changes in the iBooks application. I was writing an article for Tidbits about what was new in iBooks. And after I wrote my article, I got on the web and I Googled for other articles about the same thing, sort of, check out the competition a little, but also, see what I missed, see if I could get some good ideas. And
that was not good.
A little alarm just went off on my computer, but that's all right. It's not important. I found that a very common form of article was that the website writing the article just said a new version of iBooks came out, and they put a screenshot of the screen that came up showing what was new in iBooks in their article, and that was the end of it. So one sentence, one screenshot, done. And I thought, what is the world come to? This is terrible. but But on the other hand, you can kind of see their point, because probably Apple's going to come out with another version of iBooks, a week later. And by the time they finish the article, it would be obsolete anyway. So why not just take the screenshot? So, yeah.
Yeah, it is, and we always sort of get to this point when we talk to you or Adam about books and publications and all, because a lot of us look to you all to help us get the most out of our devices, whether they're Macs or iPads or iPhones or whatever. You and your group of authors and columnists, and it's just a bigger challenge. But I want to go back to the book, because that's what we're here to talk about. What else is in Take Control of Your iPad, the latest edition, that folks should be aware of?
Well, for this edition, I changed it around actually a bit more than I thought I would. It used to talk about, I used to have this whole chapter about which iPad should you buy. And it looked at all the hardware features with respect to if you should get the original iPad or the second generation iPad, the iPad 2. And that was fine. I liked it. But I felt like at this point, a more important question was, which iPad do you have? And that people needed to figure out which iPad they have. And I know probably a lot of people listening to this will think, well, that's kind of a stupid question. Of course you know what iPad you have. But I'm guessing that there are a whole bunch of people who got a hand-me-down iPad and are not terrifically clear on which one they have. And so the chapter looks very specifically at the hardware that might be different depending on which iPad you have, so that you can understand the capabilities of your iPad. And I also see it a little bit as sort of historical documentation. So 5 years from now, when someone encounters, say, a third generation iPad, and even if they knew full well what was in it now, they probably will have forgotten, because we'll be on, the iPad 7 or something. So I see it partly as just very clear documentation of what does what. I feel that in the first version of this book, there was a whole lot in it about what to do about Mobile Me, and if you have Mobile Me, what to set up for your iCloud account, and a whole lot of that just got erased out, because at this point, hopefully you have switched away from Mobile Me, and if you haven't done that yet, you're going to have to very soon, because it's going to go away at the end of June. And I'm kind of hoping that the book won't need to be updated until July anyway. So a whole lot of that got moved out. There's new coverage of iTunes U, because in January, Apple released the iTunes U app. I hadn't had a chance to take a look at it. And it's really interesting because you can still access videotaped and audio taped spoken podcast sort of episodes of lectures from major professors at major universities giving all kinds of amazingly interesting lectures, and you can just download them and listen to them just basically like a podcast, only it's a college course. It's just an absolutely phenomenal free resource. It's almost sort of hidden because you don't hear that much about it. But it used to just kind of be part of iTunes. But Apple broke it out into its own app called iTunes U, and they added a new kind of course, which instead of it just being a series of videos or spoken audio files, it has an outline that you can kind of work your way through, and the outline combines spoken material, videotaped material, and written material. It doesn't necessarily have all three in every single course, but it could. And the written material you actually read over in iBooks, where you have the tools of iBooks like highlighting and notes. And it's a full course, and it looks phenomenal. I regrettably was too busy writing my book to take one of the courses, but it looked really neat. And so when I got to the chapter about listening to stuff on your iPad, it ended up taking me an extra day because I had to really explore this app and what it offers. But boy, talk about a reason to get an iPad. just to enjoy this stuff, it's a great device for that kind of thing. So yeah, so I had to add a whole section about that, and I have a lot of trouble with the chapter about ebooks because I have to really rein myself in. There's so much I want to tell people, but I added more tips and tricks for using iBooks. I streamlined and reorganized it so I could cram more in without taking up more space. And I had to add an explanation of Apple's new iBooks textbook format to the chapter. So it kind of went on for a bit, and I have an editor, and my editor helped me, restrain my enthusiasm. So because you want the book to be evenly balanced. You don't want, certain chapters to have much more emphasis than other chapters. The chapter about the setup assistant changed a lot, and not really because I got a lot of reader feedback about it, but because it nagged at me. The setup assistant is what happens when you get a new iPad. When you turn it on for the first time, it asks you a series of 8 or 9 questions. Just, do you want to turn on location services? Do you want to connect to a wireless network? Just, basic setup stuff. It also comes up if you have to reset your iPad. So anyway, I felt that to fully understand and fully answer all the questions Setup Assistant asked you in a very knowledgeable way, you had to read just a huge amount of stuff because there's, location services. It seems like a trivial question. Do you want to turn on location services so your iPad knows where you are? But it's not quite trivial. And voice dictation, which is an option on the third generation iPad, is not trivial at all to explain because people have to be aware of some privacy implications associated with that feature because the actual translation, what's the word? The voice that you speak into the iPad is not converted to text on the iPad. It is converted to text up on some Apple server in the cloud. And so there could be some privacy implications for people in certain professions. So just a lot of this stuff needed more explication so that a person could, take control of it. But I also kind of know that most people are not going to read more than they absolutely have to in order to set up their iPad. So it's sort of ridiculous to expect them to. So I reorganized the whole thing so that it walks you through it pretty quickly with just minimum pointers and some links to other parts of the book in case you want to know more. And then I moved more of the more deep content further forward into the book so people can explore it when they're ready.
Tonya, it sounds like, once again, a great addition. And I really like what we started out with, the idea that this book is for anyone who's just getting an iPad, regardless of which generation iPad. You're going to get the most out of it by taking advantage of this book and learning what your iPad can do and what the next generation can do, or the next generation, and that way you can decide when it may be time to upgrade for you. How much is the book?
The book is $15.
Okay. And I bet you can find it on TakeControlBooks.com.
Right. So I always tell people they should buy the book from www.takecontrolbooks.com, and it'll be right on the homepage. So you don't have to worry about a special URL because we'll feature it on the homepage for a number of weeks. And the reason why it's great to buy it from our website is the book gets registered into an account for you as you buy it. And that means that if there is a free update, because everyone who bought this book last fall for iOS 5 is getting a free update. So it's like thousands and thousands of people. So I don't know if the next version of this book will be a free update or not. It kind of depends on what Apple does. So if the next version is for iOS 5.2, for instance, it'll probably be free. But if it's for iOS 6, probably not. But anyway, the point is, if you're registered into our site, we can send you an email message telling you if an update is available. And if it's not a free update, I believe that in the almost 10 years we've been doing this, we have never failed to offer a discount for a paid update to people who we could get in touch with. You can also download it in different formats from your account, and it's sort of like mini iTunes Store re-downloads. I say mini because we're such a tiny company compared to Apple. But you can also just get the book from the iBook store if that's more convenient for you. It's available there, and it's actually also available. It may not be available in this version when you hear this podcast, but we do sell it on the Amazon Kindle store. So if you want to read about the iPad on your Kindle or in the Kindle app on the iPad, that's an option for you.
Great. Well, we'll put links in the show notes directly to the book, of course, at takecontrolbooks.com, and we'll also add in the others as they become available, so that no matter when you listen to this, you can always go to the Mac Voices TV or Mac Notables websites and find it. Tonya, keep on writing. We love having you here, and we always learn something when you're here, and it's always fun. We'll definitely be back to talk about something real soon.
All right. Thank you, Jack.
Folks, this is Mac Notables on Mac Voices TV. We'll be back with more soon. We are the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. Thanks for watching. Mac Voices TV is part of the Mac Voices Group and a member of Mac Level 10.